The banking app refreshed 3 times, and every single time it came back with the same number, a number that made absolutely no sense. I stood in my kitchen at 5:40 inches the morning, still in the flannel shirt I'd fallen asleep in, staring at my phone like the screen was going to change its mind. That can't be right. That's a glitch. Bank apps glitch all the time. They don't. I'm Ray Kowalski. I'm 54 years old. I own Kowalski's Auto Body on the southwest side of Detroit, and I have for 26 years. I know hard work. I know what it means to build something slow, honest, and real, with your hands and your reputation and nothing else. I thought I knew my life. I thought I understood every piece of it, until a Friday morning in October showed me exactly how much I'd been choosing not to see. I want to tell you this story because I think some of you are going to recognize the feeling inside it, maybe not the details, but the specific cold sensation when something you trusted completely turns out to have been hollower than you knew. If you've ever felt that, this story is for you. If you haven't, I genuinely hope it stays that way. But let's go back to that kitchen. I woke at 5:22 a.m. because the house felt wrong. Not loud wrong, quiet wrong. The kind of quiet a mechanic recognizes when a sound that should still be running isn't. Sandra's side of the bed was cold. Not just got up cold. Hours cold. I told myself she'd gone to the pharmacy on Livernois. She did that sometimes when she couldn't sleep. I told myself a lot of things that morning that turned out to be nothing but comfortable lies I was telling myself. I walked downstairs in my socks. The floor creaked in the exact places it always did. I'd been meaning to fix the 4th step from the bottom since 2021 and never got around to it. The kitchen was dark, except for the orange glow of the coffee maker still warm. That told me she hadn't left long before sunrise. Maybe 3 hours. Maybe 4. Then I saw the ring, sitting on the counter beside the sink, on a folded paper towel. Set down carefully, deliberately. Sandra's ring had a small groove in the band from the time she reached into an engine bay helping me on a Saturday afternoon 12 years ago. I knew that ring by touch. I picked it up and just stood there. For about 2 seconds I was somewhere else entirely. A reception hall in Melvindale with Christmas lights strung along the ceiling because Sandra loved Christmas lights in any season. Damon, 7 years old, already in a clip-on tie he kept straightening with both hands, had fallen asleep against my shoulder before the cake was even cut. Then my phone buzzed. Joint checking, nearly empty. Household savings, gone. The emergency account I'd quietly built since the pandemic nearly ended the business, wiped. And a third notification business reserve account, transfer pending. I refreshed the screen 3 times. Then I put both hands flat on the tile counter and breathed through my nose, like a man trying not to do something he can't undo. That wasn't comfort money. That wasn't vacation money. Thursday afternoon I had manually moved funds from the business line because Monday was coming fast. 2 body techs, a part-time detailer, 12 years of front desk and bookkeeping work from Phyllis, and a stack of supply invoices sitting in a folder on my desk at the shop. That was other people's livelihoods sitting in those accounts. Gone. The note was folded under the coffee maker. Raymond, I've been suffocating in this life for years and you were too busy with that garage to notice. Trevin sees me in ways you never did. Damon needs stability I can't provide him. Don't come looking, Sandra. I read that second to last line about 7 times. Damon needs stability I can't provide him. Like she was leaving notes about a piece of furniture she didn't have room for anymore. I don't remember deciding to go to the shop. One moment I was in that kitchen, and the next I was driving through light rain on Michigan Avenue while the city barely woke up around me. Delivery trucks. A couple of guys heading to early plant shifts. A Kroger van pulling into a lot. Normal people. Normal morning. Meanwhile, my entire life had come apart at the seams somewhere between midnight and 5 a.m., and nobody on that road had any idea. Kowalski's Auto Body sat off a side street between a muffler shop and a dry cleaner with a for-lease sign that had been there since 2019. The shop sign out front buzzed faintly in the rain when I unlocked the side entrance. Inside smelled like Bondo, cold metal, and stale coffee that had been sitting since the afternoon before. 26 years of that smell. 26 years of that particular combination feeling like home. I flipped the fluorescent lights on one bank at a time. Bay 1, a Ford pickup waiting on a rear panel replacement. Bay 2, a Cadillac Escalade I'd taken on as a favor to an old customer. Bay 3, empty, except for a worn tire leaning against the wall. I sat down on that tire and put my face in my hands. And that's where it hit me. Not the money first. Not even Sandra. The fear. The specific, cold, middle-aged fear of a man who realizes that everything he spent 26 years building honestly could disappear in a single bad weekend. My shoulders shook once. Then again. Then I cried harder than I want to admit, not loud, not dramatic, just completely exhausted. Rain hit the metal roof in a low, steady rhythm. The cooling tick of engines in the back bays kept time underneath it. I've worked around machines long enough to know they usually warn you before they fail. A vibration, a rattle, something slipping before something breaks. I thought I knew how to listen for trouble. Apparently I'd stopped listening at home years ago without realizing it. Around 7:15, the side door opened. Damon walked in wearing basketball shorts, a Detroit Lions hoodie, and one untied shoe. Phone in one hand, screen dark. He scanned the shop before he looked at me. He's always done that, checked the room before he committed to it. I'd never fully understood that about him until this morning. "You didn't come home," he said quietly. I wiped my face fast and stood. "Sorry, bud. Should have texted." His eyes moved from my truck keys on the toolbox to my face. He wasn't looking at me like a confused kid. He was looking at me like someone who'd already figured it out and was waiting to see whether I'd be straight with him. "She left with Trevin," he said. Not a question. That hurt worse than the note, because there was absolutely no surprise in his voice, just a quiet, tired weight that had no business being in a 13-year-old's eyes. Like he'd been preparing himself for this and was relieved, in the worst possible way, to finally know it was real. I nodded once. Damon looked at the concrete floor. Same oil stains he used to trace into shapes when he was little, crouching beside Bay 3, waiting for me to close up for the night. He looked back up. "She took money from the business too." I started to answer. "Trevin asked about those accounts a lot," he said. I noticed. I stared at him. There are moments as a parent, and I use that word on purpose, because I earned it when you suddenly realize your kid has been watching and carrying and processing things you never gave him credit for. This was one of those moments. It hit me somewhere behind the ribs. That night, neither of us ate much real dinner. Around 9, Damon came into the kitchen carrying 2 grilled cheese sandwiches, one of them burnt almost entirely black on one side. "I forgot to flip it," he said, looking at the scorched edge. I almost laughed anyway. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table while rain moved against the windows. Then he got up, went to his room, and came back holding a worn manila folder. His hands were shaking slightly when he set it on the table between us. "I didn't know what else to do with it," he said softly. I looked at the folder, then at him. I didn't open it right away, and I know that sounds strange, given what was inside. But when a 13-year-old places evidence of his own mother's betrayal in front of you, something in your mind goes somewhere else for a moment. Some part of you still wants to be wrong about everything. Some part of you isn't ready to close the last exit. Damon shifted his weight from foot to foot. The kitchen clock sounded loud. The rain against the windows kept going. I opened the folder. Photographs. Receipts. Screenshots printed on copy paper. A photo of a dark blue Charger parked 2 blocks from Damon's school, the temporary plate clearly visible. A motel booking confirmation printout. A prepaid phone number in pencil beside the words, Cardinal Inn, Kalamazoo. Then a blurry photograph I recognized immediately, the metal lockbox in my shop office, the one with emergency operating cache, visible through what looked like the cracked open office door. I looked up slowly. Damon was already talking. I just started noticing things. After a while. That phrase dropped into my chest like something heavy dropped into still water, meaning my son had been scared for months while I walked around my house acting like everything was basically fine. "Damon, why didn't you tell me?" His face tightened slightly. "I tried once. You said she was probably just stressed." He was right. I remembered it immediately. About 4 months earlier, he'd mentioned Trevin driving slowly past his school twice in 1 week. I told him adults had complicated friendships sometimes. God help me. I said that to a 13-year-old who was already putting pieces together that I refused to look at. I'd spent over 2 decades diagnosing sounds and shudders under hoods, and I couldn't diagnose the crisis sitting at my own dinner table. We sat in silence for a moment. Then he started talking for real. Not fast, not performed. Just carefully honest, the way he always was when something actually mattered. Sometimes I'd hear her outside on the phone after she thought I was asleep, he said. I'd keep the game audio on so she wouldn't know I was awake. He swallowed hard. Trevin would get loud sometimes. I went still. At who? At her. At me, once. He grabbed my arm one night because I came downstairs and startled him. Damon looked embarrassed suddenly, like he'd said more than he intended to. He said I scared him, but it hurt. Something cold and deliberate settled into my chest. I pictured it too clearly. A grown man's hand, hard, on a kid who already felt unsafe in his own house. 13 years old, barefoot, pretending the next morning that everything was fine. Pretending to his mother, pretending to me, pretending to himself. Carrying all of it alone because he didn't want to break something that was already cracking. I looked down at the folder. You put this together because you were scared. He nodded once. I thought maybe she was going to leave. His voice caught slightly on that word. I wanted proof, in case everybody thought you were lying. That was the moment I stopped seeing a folder of evidence and started seeing something else entirely. Survival. A kid trying to prepare himself for abandonment before it happened, and trying to protect me in the same motion, without being asked, without any acknowledgement that what he was doing was extraordinary. I got up from the table and walked around to him. For 1 second he stiffened slightly, pure reflex, and it broke my heart to see it. Then I pulled him into a hug and he grabbed on immediately, both arms tight, face pressed against my shoulder, neither of us trying to hold it together anymore. I'm sorry, I said. For what? For not seeing it when I should have. He was quiet for a moment. Then, against my shoulder. I didn't want you to get hurt either. Honestly, that one almost finished me completely. You spend years being the steady one, the one who handles things, the one who makes sure the lights stay on. And the whole time, the kid you were trying to protect had been quietly trying to protect you back. Sometimes the people who love you most do it without any fanfare at all. Sometimes love is just a 13-year-old kid saving screenshots on a shared cloud account because he couldn't figure out what else to do. I want to stop here for a moment, because if you've ever been in a situation where someone told you through their actions, their silences, their small daily dismissals that you were too ordinary, too predictable, too settled to be worth staying for, you probably already understand something about this story that most people won't fully get. Sometimes the person accused of being boring is simply someone who chose to show up every single day without drama. And that choice is not small. It asks more of you than most people realize. The next morning I barely slept before heading to the shop before dawn. Phyllis pulled in right behind me, 2 gas station coffees in hand, took one look at my face, and stopped walking entirely. What happened to you? I handed her Sandra's note without saying anything. She read it once, then again, slower. Her expression went through 3 different things before settling on something clean and operational. The accounts, she said. Yeah. She didn't curse. She made a sound that was somehow worse than cursing. Then she sat down at the desk, opened the bookkeeping software, and we spent the next 2 hours going through everything. Sandra had also attempted to access the vendor invoice management system. Luckily, she hadn't fully understood how those accounts were isolated from the household funds. Phyllis leaned back at one point and said, with absolute deadpan delivery, "Your wife treated your business accounts like a self-checkout lane." I actually snorted despite myself. That's what 12 years of someone knowing you looks like. They understand exactly when one small stupid laugh is the only thing keeping you functional. By noon, the bank flagged multiple transactions and initiated a fraud hold. Unfortunately, that also froze money I legitimately needed for operations. Monday payroll became a very real emergency. I spent the afternoon calling suppliers asking for short extensions, hating every call. One parts distributor I'd used for 15 years just said, "You're good for it, Ray." That landed harder than anger would have. I'd spent over 2 decades being the guy people trusted automatically, and now I was the guy asking for grace. Sunday, I sold my fishing boat, listed it Friday night. By Saturday afternoon, a retired postal worker named George was standing in my driveway with a brown paper bag containing $5,800 in cash, looking like he wanted to say something but couldn't quite get there. "Hell of a price for something like this," he finally offered. "Need to move it fast," I said. He nodded slowly, the way people nod when they understand more than you're saying out loud. After he drove away with the trailer behind his truck, I stood there for a long time staring at the empty concrete pad beside the garage wall. That boat wasn't a luxury. That was 15 years of Saturday mornings on the Detroit River. Monday morning, the school called. Damon had put his fist into a locker hard enough to leave a visible dent after another kid in the hallway made a comment about his mother leaving with some guy. I drove over immediately. The assistant principal sat behind her desk, carefully managing her expression, while Damon sat across from her with an ice pack over his hand, eyes fixed on the floor. "Would you like to tell me what happened?" she asked. Damon shrugged. She tried again. "The other student says you threatened him." Damon looked up. "He said my mom ran off with a loser." A pause. "That part's not wrong." The room went quiet. Then softly. "She didn't run away." He said it like he'd been thinking about exactly how to word it for a while. "She left me. On purpose." The principal's expression changed immediately. Mine changed right alongside it. That night, just after midnight, my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. A woman's voice, low and quick. "Is this Raymond Kowalski?" "Yes." A hesitation. Muffled sounds in the background. And then, faintly, unmistakably, Sandra crying. The woman dropped her voice further. "Sir, I think your wife is in some kind of trouble." The line went dead. 20 minutes later, Sergeant Calvin Webb called me back. His voice carried a different weight than our earlier conversations. More careful. "Ray," he said, "I need you to hear me out." He explained that Trevon had an open probation case in Indiana, and his name had surfaced in connection with a fraud report. He and Sandra had been at the Cardinal Motor Inn outside Kalamazoo, until a routine patrol in the lot spooked them, and they left fast. They abandoned a backpack in the room. Inside was a business card. Mine. One. I'd given Sandra back when we were first dating. She kept it in her wallet for years, said it was useful when friends needed a trustworthy shop. Funny what people hold on to right before they set fire to your life. Webb told me not to interfere with anything official. My attorney, Angela Worthington, said the same. Go collect what was clearly mine. Stay calm. Don't make it about anything except recovering property. So I drove to Kalamazoo. 3 hours of gray Michigan highway, rain on the windshield the entire way, not dramatic, not hard enough to pull over, just relentless, the kind that wears on you. I passed truck stops and billboard injury lawyers, and miles of flat, wet fields that looked about as exhausted as I felt. I kept thinking about the night Sandra helped me swap out a water pump on her old Pontiac in the driveway, and we both got soaked and laughed about it for a week. I kept thinking about Damon learning to ride a bike on that same strip of concrete, furious at the physics of it, refusing to let me hold the seat. I kept thinking about 100 ordinary Saturdays that apparently hadn't been enough for her. Some things don't explode. They wear down quietly, one small slip at a time, until one morning you're standing in a kitchen holding a ring that isn't on anyone's finger anymore. The Cardinal Motor Inn sat off a highway exit between a gas station and a fried chicken place with a faded sign. One-story building, green doors, an ice machine near the entrance losing a private fight with itself. The woman at the front desk was in her mid-50s, reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, a coffee mug the approximate size of a small bucket. "You Raymond?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." She looked me over once. "I'm Brenda. You look like a man who's had the worst week of the last decade." I said I couldn't argue with that. Brenda took me back to the small office behind the front desk, humming mini-fridge, stacked linens, a security monitor showing grainy parking lot footage. She told me Trevon had tried to pay with 2 different cards. Both declined. He got loud when the second one failed. He complained about the room temperature, the towels, the quality of the parking lot lighting. Brenda said he behaved like a man expecting a resort who had somehow ended up at a highway motel next to a vending machine, and was personally offended by the situation. "And Sandra?" I asked. Brenda's expression shifted, softened but carefully. By Sunday night she looked scared. Not, she chose her words, not uninvolved. She knew what she was doing, but scared. That landed in a complicated place. Part vindication, part something sadder than vindication. Brenda handed me a clear plastic bag. The police had taken what they needed already. Inside, the backpack, black nylon, 1 broken zipper. Inside that, 2 prepaid phones, a pawn receipt from Gary, Indiana, a folded piece of motel stationery. I opened it. 3 lines, blocky handwriting. "You're on your own past Kalamazoo. Don't follow me. You should have brought more cash." I sat down before my knees decided to. Trevon had been running a con inside Sandra's con. He had taken what he needed, our money, whatever she'd helped move, and had planned from the beginning to leave her stranded at a highway motel once she'd served her purpose. Sandra thought she was sprinting toward some vivid new life. She was actually just a vehicle for a man who needed a funded exit. Part of me felt something close to grim satisfaction for about 4 seconds. I'm not proud of that. Then I felt sick, because once upon a time, I loved this woman. I drove 40 minutes in a snowstorm to fix her car before we were even officially together. I held her hand through every one of Damon's ear infections when he was 4. We danced in a parking lot outside a wedding venue because we'd arrived late and the doors were locked, and she'd laughed so hard she had to lean against my truck to stay standing. You don't stop remembering just because someone betrays you. The grief is real even when the anger is also real. Both things live in you simultaneously, and neither one cancels the other out. On the drive back, I called Damon from a rest area outside Lansing. I didn't tell him everything, but I told him Trevin had planned to leave his mother behind too. A long pause on the line. Then, criminals are bad at being loyal. I let out a breath that almost became a laugh. Seems to be true. Another pause. His voice got smaller. I kept hoping she'd change her mind before it got this bad. I looked through the rest area window at a family loading bags into a minivan, a dad lifting a car seat while his wife handed juice boxes to kids in the back, completely ordinary, completely intact, completely unaware how fragile it is. I know, bud, I said quietly, because I did know. Right up until I saw that ring on the paper towel. 2 hours later, Sandra called. Unknown number. I almost let it go. When I answered, I heard breathing first fast, unsteady, stripped of everything I'd ever associated with her confidence. Ray. Just my name, and I already knew. They arrested Trevon. Probation violation and something about the card accounts. I don't have my wallet. I don't have anything. The cards are frozen. I can't. I pulled to the shoulder. That's what happens, I said. My voice came out steadier than I expected. Please don't be cold right now. Please. Cold. After she drained payroll money. After 3 words and a note about the son she was leaving behind. After everything, she still had a way of casting herself as the one who needed handling carefully. I'm not being cold, I said. I'm being accurate. She started crying harder. Then, he told me we were going to start over somewhere clean. He told me Damon could visit on weekends, he said. I went quiet. He told you to leave Damon behind, I said. Silence. Sandra, he planned your son out of the picture. A door opened somewhere on her end. A voice in the background. Institutional. She whispered, Tell Damon I love him. No, I said. She inhaled sharply. You tell him that yourself, someday, if he's willing to hear it. That conversation belongs to you. I won't carry your messages. For once she had nothing to say. The line held silence for a moment, then ended. I sat on the highway shoulder with my hazard lights blinking for a full minute before I pulled back into traffic. The hearing was on a gray Thursday morning in Wayne County Family Court. Cold enough outside that everyone walked fast from the parking structure with their shoulders up around their ears. I wore a dark suit I'd last used for a funeral. Damon told me I looked like a mechanic trying to convince someone I owned a tie. That's fair. Angela Worthington met us outside the courtroom carrying 2 thick folders, and the calm expression of someone who has seen enough family court to be beyond surprise. Ready? She asked. No, I said truthfully. She nodded like that was the correct answer. Good. Means you're paying attention. Damon stayed in the hallway with Sandra's mother, Evelyn, who had called Angela directly 2 weeks earlier and said she could not stay silent, who showed up to my shop with printed emails and a voicemail transcript and shaking hands because she said she loved her daughter, but she would not lie for her. He'd already carried enough. He didn't need to sit inside fluorescent light watching it get sorted officially. Courtrooms feel a specific way. Worn wood, old coffee, damp coats, fluorescent light that makes everyone look slightly worse than they are. People pretending to be calmer than they actually are, which any mechanic understands that particular quiet dignity of sitting beside something broken, hoping the damage is survivable. Sandra sat at the opposite table. Seeing her there knocked something loose in my chest, not longing. Something more complicated than that, the specific complicated weight of 15 years of ordinary life, sitting in a room in a dark suit, across from you, guarded. Then she looked up, and the feeling closed. Her attorney went first. For a while, honestly, it was effective. Sandra cried while describing emotional isolation, feeling invisible, feeling like she had disappeared inside someone else's routine. She said Trevin found her during a vulnerable period. She said she had been manipulated. Then she said the line that almost destabilized me. Raymond never chose me. He chose the garage every single time. I hate admitting this worked even slightly. But sitting in public and hearing a version of your marriage described, even a dishonest version, will find the cracks in you if any exist. Maybe I had gotten quieter over the years. Maybe routine had slowly replaced the things that used to make us feel close. When a marriage ends, even in court, the person who destroyed it holds fragments of something true, and those fragments will find you even when you know the larger story is a fabrication. That's the ugliest part of betrayal. You can know someone burned your life down and still briefly wonder if you handed them the match. Then Angela stood up. No speeches, no theater, just documentation, laid out with the steady precision of someone who arranges tools before a repair job. Bank transfer records with timestamps, business account access logs, motel confirmation printouts, screenshot records. A pawn receipt from Gary, Indiana. A timeline assembled so cleanly it was almost quiet. Sandra stopped crying about 12 minutes in. When Evelyn's voicemail transcript was introduced Sandra's own mother. Under oath, Sandra looked physically smaller somehow. Angela read the key line without editorial. Once it moves, Raymond won't know what hit him. The courtroom went still. Papers stopped shuffling. Sandra's attorney set down his pen. Then Brenda, from the Cardinal Motor Inn, appeared on a laptop screen from behind her front desk, reading glasses on, a large coffee beside her keyboard. Judge Patricia Osei reminded her she was under oath. Yes, Your Honor. I understand completely. Angela asked her to describe Trevon's behavior during check-in. Brenda sighed with the weariness of someone who has seen a lot of men like Trevon. He asked me why our towels weren't softer while his second credit card was declining. A ripple of something close to laughter moved through the courtroom before people caught themselves. Judge Osei adjusted her glasses. Please limit your response to factual observations, ma'am. Yes, Your Honor, Brenda said pleasantly. Factually speaking, his cards were declined 4 times across 2 different accounts. Sandra's face had gone completely flat. Angela placed the bus ticket on the table. Kalamazoo to Memphis. 1 passenger. Trevin Griggs. Not Sandra. Judge Osei studied it carefully. Then she looked at Sandra directly. Mrs. Kowalski, were you aware Mr. Griggs was booked on this departure alone? And that was the moment. Sandra cracked, not gradually, not softly, but the way something breaks when pressure that has been building finally finds exactly the wrong spot. He told me we were supposed to be in Florida by Monday, she snapped. The courtroom went completely, utterly still. No papers moving. No coughing. No shifting in seats. Sandra's own attorney stopped writing mid-sentence. And Judge Osei lowered her reading glasses slowly and looked at Sandra with the specific, steady patience of someone who has just watched every piece land exactly where they expected it to land. That was the moment the case ended, before the ruling, before the paperwork. Because truth doesn't usually announce itself dramatically. Most of the time it just waits patient as a mechanic, patient as rain until someone gets angry enough, or scared enough, to say the wrong thing out loud in a room full of people who are writing it down. The ruling came down exactly where Angela had predicted. No access to business funds for Sandra. Temporary restrictions remained on all disputed accounts. Primary residential stability determinations favored me regarding Damon's schooling and living situation. A formal referral for financial fraud investigation connected to Trevon's activities and Sandra's documented involvement. Not a perfect ending. Not a movie ending. Some of the money was genuinely gone. My reputation in the neighborhood would take months to repair. Damon had years of real emotional work ahead of him, and honestly, so did I. But for the first time since that Friday morning, the truth existed somewhere official, somewhere outside my own spinning, exhausted head. In the hallway afterward, Sandra crouched in front of Damon. He didn't walk away. He stood there quietly and let her speak. She told him she was still his mother. He looked at her for a long moment, not with anger, not with performance, just honestly. That's why this hurt so much, he said softly. Sandra started crying again. But this time Damon didn't move toward her. He moved toward me. And when he slipped his hand into mine in that courthouse hallway, something I had been holding tightly for 3 straight weeks, finally let go. A month later, things were still not fully repaired. Kowalski's barely survived the month. I took on extra work personally to rebuild reserves. Phyllis kept threatening to physically ban me from the building if I skipped lunch twice in the same week. Sergeant Webb stopped by occasionally, always pretending he just happened to be in the area. Some customers came back. Some didn't. That's how trust works. It rebuilds on its own schedule, not yours, and there's nothing you can do to rush it. One Saturday afternoon, Damon and I worked together on an old Buick Riviera that had been sitting in Bay 3 since the summer. Classic rock on the shop radio. Rain on the roof, the same steady sound as that terrible Friday morning, except now it just felt like weather, not like something pressing down, just rain. Damon handed me a ratchet and spent 20 minutes explaining, in detailed and passionate terms, exactly why he was confident the Lions were going to win the division this year. I listened carefully and nodded like a man who was legally required to take this seriously. The shop smelled like warm metal and rubber and fresh coffee. At some point, I looked around and realized the place didn't feel haunted anymore, just familiar. Worn in the honest way things get when they've been genuinely used for a long time by people who actually showed up. I used to think that when someone betrays you, the goal is to make them feel it. At 54, I know better. Real recovery doesn't look like revenge. Real recovery looks like keeping your word to the people who stayed. It looks like a kid handing you tools on a Saturday afternoon while he argues football with more confidence than the season probably deserves. It looks like turning the lights on one more morning, even before you're completely sure why it's worth it. And then slowly, quietly, without any announcement at all you remember. If this story stayed with you, drop a number in the comments right now. Type 1 if you think Sandra made her own choices and earned her consequences. Type 2 if you think the system here actually did what it was supposed to do, or type 3 if you've been through something that broke you open like this and you rebuilt anyway. And tell me where you're watching from, what city. What time is it where you are right now? I genuinely like to know. These stories only mean something if they reach people who actually need them. If you're new here, welcome. This is what we do. We tell the stories people are afraid to say out loud. If that's the kind of thing you want more of, subscribe. We'll be here. This is a fictional story inspired by real emotional experiences, fully rewritten and reimagined in Detroit, Michigan to create original content. Any resemblance to real people or events is entirely coincidental.